David Kohl is well known in agriculture. He's a professor emeritus at Virginia Tech and is also the president of AgriVisions, a consulting business based in Blacksburg, Virginia. He spent significant time in Nebraska giving several presentations across the state this month. We caught up with him at the Embassy Suites in Lincoln recently to discuss land prices, falling commodity markets, and the role outside economies play in U.S. agricultural success.
Well, it's real interesting. The global economy, particularly emerging nations, are very, very connected to the prosperity and wealth of our agriculture in our rural areas. And one of the things that we're starting to see is the BRICS, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and the KIMTs, South Korea, Indonesia, Mexico, and Turkey, which they represent 23% of the world economy, but they've been 53% of the world growth. Jeff, what we're seeing is they're actually slowing down. And directly and indirectly, it's having an impact on our commodity prices, particularly corn, soybeans, but eventually it's going to have an impact on oil prices and fertilizer prices as well.
I imagine they're slowing down for a variety of reasons, but is there any indication that that slowing down is going to turn around?
No, matter of fact, it looks like, if you think about it, those nations have grown on average a 9.8% rate since 1998. They're currently growing at a composite of about 4.4%. I could really see they might increase to 5 or 6%, but they're probably going to come down into that range, particularly as those economies mature and as you'll have some societal changes occur in those nations.
Going into 2014, how do you feel about the U.S. economy?
Well, one of the things about the U.S. economy, she's basically been on steroids by the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve, by printing money and doing some of their quantitative easing, buying mortgage-backed securities, has basically put the economy on steroids to create the wealth effect. And what's the wealth effect? Every time a stock goes up in dollar and value, we spend 4 cents more because we feel good about ourselves. But the wealth effect is alive and well in agriculture in rural America, because every time land goes up or real estate goes up $1 in value, we spend 9 cents more. So one of the things is we're really going to have to watch the tapering back and the possibility of the rise of interest rates with the Federal Reserve, because it's going to impact the income statement and the balance sheets of our people in agriculture and rural areas.
With that in mind, ag land prices have been incredibly high now. Are we set for retracement of any kind?
It's real interesting. You look at Nebraska land values up over 50%, the past 2 years. That's not sustainable. It's actually a bubble, but you're not the worst. North Dakota is actually much higher than you. One of the things that I see, we're starting to come into an era where the margins are getting pinched, particularly over on the grain side. But it'll probably take a year or two for the psychology to kick in, because you got to keep in mind 80% of all economics is behavioral, and so before that behavior kicks in, it's going to take 1 or 2, not necessarily crash years, but moderating the economy to come over and see a re-entrenchment. Particularly, it'll be cash rents first and then land values second.
You're talking about the psychology of the market or the psychology of the farmer?
Psychology of the farmer. And one of the things that you look at, every time a farmer makes an investment decision, it's not made off logic. 80% of the time it's made off emotion and behavior. But the markets are also impacted there, and that's why you get your wide swings in your economy and why you have such market variability.
As you said, grain prices are going to be tight, going to make break-evens tight in 2014. What's the potential floor? I mean, what's the worst case scenario that you could see?
Well, I'm not a commodities
Right.
person, but you know what I'm telling people, in their cash flow projections? I'd take the range all the way from $2.75 a bushel right on up to $5 a bushel. And it's real interesting. Some of our farm record data finds that half of the producers' cost of production on corn is above $5 a bushel. And so if they don't have a risk management marketing program, Jeff, those farms could be facing some real negative type of margins. So I would say scenario planning with those various scenarios. And of course, we've got to watch the weather in South America, and of course, we've got to watch next year's growing season. But those are some of the range of possibilities that I could see. So scenario planning and cash flow and financing is going to be very, very critical.
I've been reading some of the notes of your talks around the state this week, and one of the things that pops out is working capital. You always mention working capital. Why is that so important right now?
Working capital, it's analogous to a linebacker on defense. If the running back breaks through the defensive line, then the linebacker's there to tackle the running back. And working capital is basically your backup, and everybody thinks that's just cash. No, it's assets that can be turned to cash without disrupting your normal operation. And particularly if you're buying land, or particularly if you're a growing business, working capital is critical. And I often recommend at least 33% of your revenues need to be in net working capital. That's assets that can be turned to cash without disrupting normal operation. And boy, this year it's going to be very, very critical for both producer and lender to forge that relationship, go over those balance sheets to determine the working capital position.
Last year and this year, there's been so much difficulty trying to get a new 5-year farm bill passed. The political uncertainty that gives to agriculture and other export markets, does that have long-term consequences, do you feel?
Oh, absolutely. Matter of fact, all the government action is having long-term implications. You think about it, the debacle we had in Washington, D.C. this past fall potentially could have taken 0.5% right off our GDP because people are uncertain. Farmers and ranchers are uncertain. And so one of the things is a farm bill is very, very critical. And the negotiations on those farm bill is going to be very, very critical as we not only go for 2014, 2015, but as we go out toward 2020. So it is one of those items that many producers, you can't manage the farm bill, but you can manage around it. And that's why many producers, I recommend this working capital and being very objective in your decision making to kind of manage around that uncertainty.
And finally, you go into 2014, cows are really expensive to buy. There's a devastating virus in hogs right now. Commodity prices are making break-evens tight. What's going to separate the top from the bottom as we go into next year?
Gee, Jeff, you outlined a country and western song gone bad there, but it's real interesting. I can go right back to 1995 data. And if you really look at what distinguishes the top level manager, first of all, they know their cost of production. They know it via enterprise so that they can actually shift enterprise and do various things to make sure that they know what's making them the dollars and what's losing them the dollars. I think the other element is to forge a strong relationship with your lender. And it's not about the lowest interest rate. It's about having that lender come out, go over your financials with you, also being there, you know, in good times and bad times. And I think the other element that I think is very, very critical is surrounding yourself with good people. And we're coming into a time in agriculture where with the technology that we're using and with the uncertainty, you've got to have good people. And sometimes they're not family members, sometimes they're outside the family. So the people component, knowing your cost, and forging that strong relationship with the lender and focusing on working capital, that is a recipe that's going to work whether you're in good times or in difficult times.